And it can do the like simple find debug, but it can also do that. Okay, I don't want that. Like this kind of like open, like free form, go investigate. You see it got an error, something to do with the schema. It'll go and try and fix it. And it should come back to me in a minute with a table of the 5 slowest endpoints. It's failed completely to find anything from that, but like, yeah, so you see here it prints out a table of endpoints by performance. And then you can go and say, okay, find those functions and fix them. In a way that, like, without ever having interacted with Logfire at all, you've basically just given your coding agent access to your like execution data that it normally wouldn't have. And that's enough for it to go and do a pretty good job of fixing stuff. Yeah, so we have a Logfire MCP server, so it's not actually, it's just a Python package. It's a local MCP server, so it communicates over standard I/O, and it just takes one of our read tokens to have permission to query our API. So the most powerful bit of Logfire, the thing that makes it different, apart from like, you know, shiny UI and things, is that you can write arbitrary SQL against your data to go and basically investigate what's going on. As you see, like here, these are probably not that interesting SQL, but here you see I'm like grouping by collocation and region and like looking at performance, whatever else, right? It's basically an analytical database that has access to your application data as well as a like nice UI to view it. But we have an API for running SQL as well, and that's what the MCP server is using. Yeah. Yep. Or in your Parquet if you want to pay us lots of money. But yeah.
So this select or query engine is unique to Logfire?
So it's built on Data Fusion. So it's fundamentally Data Fusion. If you look at, I think this should return, yeah, Data Fusion 50. If you do like, I don't know, if you want it like, yeah, the SQL flavor is, it's pretty much Postgres except a few places where you need to remember that you're in fundamentally it's arrow data. But it's basically Postgres syntax. But Data Fusion is, what's amazing about Data Fusion is it's not a database, it's basically a library for building a database. And so we have a Postgres as the metadata store and then object store for the actual storage of the Parquet files. So we have Postgres tells us like the names of the files and the paths to the files and what's like some data about what's in each file, like min-max values and stuff like that. So when we run a query, we can generally not have to scan through all of the Parquet files, but like go down to just the particular bits you need. Sorry?
How do you integrate that technology to code base that you just typed it and you can see on that? Right?
So all I've done here in, if you look at Logfire MCP, if you look here, there's instructions on how to add an MCP server to Claude code here. So you basically follow these instructions to add another MCP server to Claude code. And then the point is Claude basically knows to go and query it. And I've cheated in one regard, which is that in the Claude MD file, I have told it somewhere, always look at Logfire, so that my demos, I don't have to say, use Logfire too. Important, always use the Logfire MCP server, when you're asked to investigate behavior, e.g. find bugs or errors or find performance issues. So that's why I didn't have to prompt it until it used Logfire MCP.
I have a question about the MCP server. If I recall correctly, last time I looked, it doesn't yet have access to evals, right?
Well, it has access to all data because all data is exposed via SQL. It probably needs to be, the prompts need to be improved to tell it how to find evals and what they are.
Okay.
And there's a table, I think, that you can query for evals that I've forgotten the name of.
So maybe that's the part that I'm not connecting the dots because I was able to just use it and get like, like the stuff that shows up in live, and etc.
Yep.
Like the evals. I'm very much trying to get like the actual score, like or whatever output from my
Yep.
LLM judge, etc.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, all of those are in spans, and so it should be possible. But like, I will get the team to find, I mean, if we can't get that to work today when we talk about evals, I will get the team to work out how to do it.
Okay.
Let me actually ask.
I'm pretty sure that, like you say, it's just knowing the table, and honestly, that would be enough.
Yeah.
But I would hope for maybe some syntactic sugar on the MCP server that has like an endpoint that'll be like, oh, evals, you just get them here or something like
Yeah.
that. That'd be fantastic.
Hopefully someone responds to my message in a minute on our Slack. Sorry? Yeah, if you just search Logfire MCP, but yeah, I'll put it in here. Oh, and you pointed out that my Python is wrong inside this thing here, so. Okay, that's working. I hadn't really realized that asking that nice guy to get me coffee now involves you all waiting 10 minutes. But we're in any rush. That's what I was going to try, just a minute. So one of the things that is nice about the gateway that I'll just quickly demonstrate is that you can, this obviously should be better integrated, but you can put a Logfire write token into the gateway and it should basically start, it should send data to Logfire, so you can basically see LLM requests as they're running through the gateway. So, yep. And you can see the exchange here. So you can see where I'm running it here. So this is without me instrumenting the code. And this is the kind of corporate value, is that like if you're running a gateway as a company, you can be like, we're going to instrument and we're going to record every request, and we were talking about the like guardrail security stuff, but also just like understanding usage patterns, who's doing what. Yep.
How does the Pydantic gateway differ from like
So Light LLM Open Router try very hard to get back to a single API format.
same thing as
Yeah, so they do that. So one of the reasons we built Gateway was that we kept speaking to people. I went and asked a bunch of people in enterprises about what they do, and I had only two answers from maybe speaking to about 10 companies. Either we built our own gateway, and it works pretty well, but like it's kind of annoying to maintain, very strong signal, or we use Light LLM, and they're a really nice team, but it's the most buggy piece of software we've ever used. And so that seemed like quite a good indicator that we could go. And to be fair, I don't think they've done anything wrong. I just think they have a like Sisyphean task in trying to maintain compatibility with every single API out there, whilst you don't control the client, you don't control the end gateway. You're trying desperately to make two different bits of Lego fit together somehow. And that's quite hard. And then you're doing that in open source software, because most of the people aren't paying for it. They're just running Light LLM somewhere. So our main feature is the lack of a feature, which is the lack of the like conversion stuff. And then I think we will do stuff around self-hosting, caching, security features, blah, 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 blah. Also finer-grained control on pricing. So you can create an API key with a very fixed limit and then go and use that for stuff or share that with people more easily, I think, than with the others. Although I'm not going to say I've looked at every feature of every single gateway out there. And then from our point of view, part of it is about finding a way to get hold of everyone who's using PydanticAI, and so most of our examples now of PydanticAI use the gateway, and the sign-up rate has been pretty good for us. I think if you're an individual, it's probably quite easy to sign up with the gateway and put your card into one system rather than 5. With apologies to the nice chap who's gone to get me a coffee, should we start talking about something interesting? I can talk a bit about MCP and how MCP integrates with PydanticAI, if that's interesting. And then my example crashed. And then the other thing that's sort of related, let me show you something that we built quite recently, which is uses MCP but also our chat UI. Yeah, I'll talk about evals, but I feel like once we start talking about evals, all subsequent conversation will be about evals. So I'm going to talk about anything else first.
Don't forget about workflows. Don't forget about workflows.
Okay, graph. Should I do graph first and then talk about that?
Let's do graphs, but don't forget it.
Okay, I'm going to do graph first. Okay, so
It looks neat.
we effectively have two ways of doing graphs. So the best example here, this was our original implementation of graphs, and this still exists, and since PydanticAI is V1, we can't just go and get rid of it. The idea is you define a node like this. So you use this data class. It can be a data class, it doesn't actually have to be, but it inherits from base node, and base node is generic and a bunch of stuff like the state of the graph. And the point is that the value that we return is an instance of the next node that we run. And so we have this like type-safe way of transitioning between nodes. So you can see here that the insert coin node is type annotated as returning coin inserted. And then obviously for typing time, it has to actually return an instance of this, and it has to be, because it has to be an instance of this data class, it has to pass the right values. And so we get this type-safe way of connecting together nodes that you wouldn't otherwise have, that doesn't exist in, for example, LangGraph.
So
And
this is the way you creating the edge between the nodes?
yes, in fact, the edge is defined
By the return.
by the return value of the node. And then if you look at the somewhere, we have end, which will, this can return end or insert coin or select product. And so this ends our graph. And so when you define your graph like this, in typing terms, all of the nodes of the graph need to be generic in the same types, need to be generic in the right state so that this all works. And sure enough, we get this like type-safe graph implementation, and we can go and inspect the type annotations and build a mermaid diagram of our graph. And this works, and it works fairly well, and there's support within this for snapshotting as at the end of each node being executed. We have generic implementation, I think, that saves to disk, and you could go and implement your own. There are two problems really with this graph implementation. One is that the logic of the graph and of which node you would run next is baked into the node definition itself. So in theory, I suppose I could take the function body out of this node and just define the node somewhere and define the function somewhere else. But we've still fundamentally got we cannot compose together a graph just by passing a bunch of nodes like this, because the nodes need to know something about the graph. The other problem with this is that the way that we do snapshotting is, oh my God, amazing. I haven't said anything remotely interesting yet. Oh my God. I'm going to come and grab a coffee. Sorry, 1 minute.
Only one of these is free.
Can I steal it?
Yeah, the milk and the cream.
Oh my God.
Go get my cups.
I think sit and enjoy it. If people want to get a cup, they can. I mean,
yeah, you're on your own for cup.
because I think that you've missed a bit already.
Okay.
This is very kind. I don't know how many people want coffee, but I do.
Well, we'll find out. If not, we can just have a lot of coffee. Seems like a solvable problem.
That's very, very kind. Thank you. Oh, that would be a way better way of doing it. I got way too much milk.
Here.
That's fair. I can do that. No, that's not going to take. Anyone? Is that right? If other people have
Yeah,
coffee?
I got it for sure.
Anyone else want some coffee? Go for it. Now I really, really need to not spill coffee on my laptop.
I love that for you.
Thanks. I'm actually gonna. Can I steal this chair?
Sure.
Put my coffee on it and not risk. No. So, so there are two problems with this structure. One is, as I said, that the nodes and the graph structure are fundamentally interlinked. And the second limitation is that you cannot do multiple node, like parallel node execution. And the reason that, without going into all the detail, basically you cannot do snapshotting. You cannot have, you know the CAP theorem of you want three things in a database, and it can be proved you can't have all three. Well, there's a kind of not so scientific thing in graphs. You want them to be type safe, have snapshotting, and do parallel node execution. You just cannot have those three things. Just isn't fucking. We thought about it for a very long time. You end up building an entire new type system on top of Python that's incrementable value or append list, stuff like that you can then, and then you have to end up returning append to list or increment value as your outputs from nodes, and it becomes complete hell. And so LangGraph have dealt with that by basically not being type safe. As in, you have this state object, you can go whatever you like to it in different nodes, and good luck.
Just put the offender and shove it
Yeah,
together.
yeah, but that's not type safe, right? As in, we chose to solve that in a different way, which was basically not to try and do the snapshotting thing at all, but instead to rely on durable execution, temporal and deboss stuff you've all seen today, And now we don't have to deal with this like snapshot or like a kind of like atomic way of incrementing our state. We can just use normal Python constructs, and then we can deal with, and then we can make it both type safe and allow parallel node execution. And so after a lot of thought, literally 6 months of thinking about this from David, our CTO, we have a new way of doing graphs, which I think the plan is to eventually to replace the like class-based graph implementation that I showed you. And I mean, I'm no expert on this, but we will work through an example. And because as code, it should work fine with Temporal because it's just Python code ultimately that's running. And the hard work is in making it type safe. And then you can call agents, PydanticAI agents, or indeed whatever other code you like within nodes to go and do the activity bit, to do the LLM calls or whatever else you like. And so if we look at a very quick counter example is not what I mean. An example of counting here.
You were saying the new way of integrating temporal and EBOS into graphs was to isolate the state away from like the actual graph.
No. So you can do state here, as we have counter state in this example. The point is that because we're not trying to do any cleverness in terms of snapshotting, and we're not trying to do any form of, so you can imagine if you're running these two nodes in parallel, at the end of it, we get back two different states. How do I merge those two things together? I can go and build an entire, basically, atomic structure for incrementing state that like allows everything to be merged, that is safe, that is basically like implementing one of those systems like in a effectively, like we need to be able to merge these things. If I want that to be type safe, we end up with an entire basically type system dedicated to those constructs, right? We can't just do .append to our list. We have to have our new like custom list type, which will get append, and now that has to be. No, we have to be resilient to which order those two are actually appended to because we're running these two nodes at the same time. We end up with an entire, more and more our own programming language, and we really don't want that. We want standard Python type work. And so our proposed solution to that, and I'll be open. This is in beta. This is relatively new. Is to completely not try and solve that problem. We do not have orchestrators. We are not trying to do running these two things across some big distributed system. We are saying that you can go and run code. This effectively is just a type safe way of defining our graph, and then so we basically define these functions that are, apart from the state that they take, pretty much independent of the rest of the structure of the graph, and then we compose them together using this graph.add or graphbuilder.add method, and this is where the like type safety comes in, because we're doing clever stuff in the edge from and to method. I admit I didn't write this code, and I'm learning it as much as you are, so let's copy it and put it into a file and try it.
Question on this as you're doing that. Does it support the idea of a node going to two different edges, and how would that be?
Yes, I think it does.
Conditional? Like a condition, basically a conditional edge.
Yes, I'm sure it does.
Okay.
Yes, because I talked about it a lot with them.
Great.
What is the AI use case? I mean, you're talking about graphs independent of AI? Or?
So in theory, it's completely independent of AI. It doesn't need to be used with AI.
Yeah.
I think time will tell whether or not graphs are really needed for AI, but there are a lot of people who are on LangGraph who are like, I want to use a graph, but I want it to be type safe. What do I use? And Pydantic Graph is an answer to that question. I think my guess is that we will, as has happened in numerous previous evolutions of tech, realize that graphs are unnecessary, probably in the long term. But if you do want them,
knowledge graph, or this is separate?
this is not knowledge graph. This is is, if I come back over to, unfortunately when David wrote these docs, he did not add nice mermaid diagrams. But like, if you look at like this, like, it's this kind of workflow graph, right? Of like the sequence of what happens. And some people think that this is extremely useful. Some people think this is absolutely key to building like state machines. Some people think it's completely unnecessary. I mean, someone said to me the best argument for graphs is to make people who want graphs happy. And if you think about graphs as an answer to that question, then it makes complete sense. And you don't have to think too hard about what the point of them is. I think if you asked LangChain why you need graphs, they would say, oh, well, you really need it for this like concept of snapshotting. Now I have some like durable system that can run, and if something fails in a node, I can just restart from where that node last failed. I think my take, and the majority of people's take, would be, let's let proper durable execution frameworks do that stuff. And then we can also get the snapshotting deep within a node. If a node takes an hour and does 1,000 things, I can recover from thing 682 rather than having to start from 0. And so
So Logfire is basically, you can technically just create this workflow within using something like Temporal, or you
Yeah.
can have a graph and then use something like LangGraph to do it, but you won't get the type safety, essentially.
well, if you use LangGraph, you would lose the type safety.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If you use Pydantic graph, you get the type safety, but you need to rely on Temporal or DBoss, etc., to give you the durable like component of it. Does that make some sense? So, I mean, the first thing to say is I've imported this example. It seems to be completely type safe, which is nice. I'm going to run it. So you can see here that I have set my counter state. I'm going to run the graph, and I'm going to find out what happens, basically. That's not very helpful. I'm going to add Logfire in to see what happens. And so you can already start to see the nodes that got executed. This is all basically instant because none of them are doing anything particularly interesting, but you see that like we can see the nodes that were executed. I'm wondering if there's a more interesting example in this page that's actually going to give us some value. So this is the parallel processing example. And I'm just like, so the g.join is the critical bit, and we're, how's reduce list append? Okay. And if we look up reduce list append, a reducer that appends to a list. So we can, sorry. If we look at, sorry? This one or the previous one? Well, it should print out, I mean, if you just copy paste it and run it, it doesn't have anything to run. So if I look at this example, yeah, you can see we've run the nodes. Yeah, and we've got back the like state object, and also got back the result value from running the graph. We see that we had our inputs, and I'm just trying to understand how we work through the nodes. so you can see that we're basically squaring. We're saying, so the first, if you look at the arguments to add, okay, that's just edges. We start with G dot start node, which is going to call square. Then we have the square node, which then calls this collect results, and then ultimately, then we call collect results, and we have going to end node. So those are our like 3 steps. I guess you always have at least those 3 steps. I mean, I suppose that making this into a temporal workflow should be as simple as wrapping this whole thing in a temporal workflow, and if we have an agent within it, we need to do the agent plugin stuff. Then an example of something that I can try and get to work here, rather than just like running these examples.
Question on wrapping it in temporal is really just the annotation.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Can we try it and see?
Yeah. So in this case, it's going to be extremely boring because all we're doing is taking. I'm going to copy paste. So we have to define our workflow. I'm going to come in here. Graph workflow. And that's just going to call main. I mean, here it's just as simple as calling main. And where did we import workflow from? I guess I need those 3. And then, so I define my graph, and then I define my method that's going to call it from within temporal. Go on then, do me some helpful imports. I don't need any of that stuff because I haven't got any of those. I don't need the resume route. I'm just going to say workflow run. I'm not going to worry about the ID. Why is that complaining? I think this might literally just be that temporal has not got the right type annotation. So let me try running that and see how we get on. I've got temporal running. Okay, and I ran the wrong function, so it's not surprising it worked. Where is ID? Okay, so, so you have to pass an ID. Okay. I bet you it's going to say it wants it to be a string, so I'll do that. It's complaining. Import. I'm going to restart Temporal in case it's got some state involved in what's going on. I would say that it's not working because we need to somehow mark UUID as something that's safe somewhere, and so we thought graphs should just work, but they don't right now. I think we need to go and make some fixes. I don't know, unless I'm... Yeah, you can literally see we're calling this UUID method deep inside the graph, and you need to somehow mark UUID as a safe method to be called within a workflow, which is, I think, is roughly what this is saying. And so I thought they were working. I feel like we need to go in and fix that, unfortunately. Unless David's already done it and I'm just not seeing, unless there's some kind of graph plugin. Presumably what we need is coming back to the question earlier about what plugins do, I feel like what we should have here is a plugin that tells us how to, that tells Temporal what to ignore, but I don't think we do have. It'd be really great if there was a graph plugin I didn't know about, but it doesn't seem to be. Okay. So I think that everyone in the company's assumption that this just worked is wrong, and we need to go fix some stuff. Which is weird because I'm sure we've had people trying it, but apparently I haven't. So I'll ask someone later, and I'll get back to you on that. But like the principle is that because the graph is deterministic, you can put activities in nodes, and I suppose that the actual point is that UUID is not deterministic. It is by definition generates a random ID. And so they're right to have pointed to an error because technically you've done something non-deterministic by calling the UUID method. But I'm sure we can work around that. Sorry, that was not as successful as I had hoped, but we will get it to work. What was the? Were we going to go on to? We were going to go on to MCP or to evals? We were going to go on to talk about MCP. Well,
MCP and then evals.
okay. So you will see if you look in the, actually I'm going to run a different example here. Sorry?
That examples are also in the same GitHub location, or?
So the graph examples that are complete are in the docs, as I was showing you in the docs. The one I just made up with Temporal that didn't work is currently where I just wrote it. I will get it working and get an example added to that repo soon.
Nice. Thank you.
So let me. So this example here, I should be able to run. And we should be able to come over here and look at, okay, and if I ask it a question, I'll just check it's all working, and then it's definitely not working. No, I think I am, here we are. Is it that the MCP server is not running? Let me turn off the MCP server for a minute and show you the outer part of what we're doing, and then I will go into some more details in a moment. So when people are building with PydanticAI or other agent frameworks, what you don't want to have to go and do is like all of the work to implement the front end yourself and the protocol for communicating between the front end and the back end. And so there are two protocols now which allow you to basically effectively use them instead of to implement that yourself. And they are AGUI, which is supposed to be this like open protocol for UIs. The other one is Vercel's AI protocol. Vercel's AI protocol, I think, is probably more widely used and comes with a nice bunch of React components for building UIs from the Vercel guys. And so that is what I am using here. So the idea of this application, which will soon, we'll have a pre-built, or we already have a pre-built bundle. We'll soon have this like shipped with PydanticAI for basically building, well, one for like running a chat UI very quickly, but also as a kickoff point to go and build full applications using their components, is a ChatGPT style interface for interacting with an LLM. So with a bit of luck, this really should be responding to me, but it is not, and I'm not sure why. And then I'm going to add an MCP server to it in a minute, but I need to work out what the hell it's doing wrong. If this example doesn't work, I can show you a much simpler MCP example, but it would be very nice to show you this as well. I think that might be just that I haven't set the... Let me set this and see if that gets things working. So once I get this actually working, I'll show you what we can do, but I don't want to waste your time if I'm going to have endless issues getting it to work. One of the things we definitely need to do here is like return the error to the user if things don't work. Okay. And so this gives us the, I can zoom in a bit, the relatively nice interface for interacting with an LLM. This should have said, we in fact didn't say it was Claude, but if it wanted to, it could have done. And if I try ChatGPT or GPT-5, it should say, we can switch models, and we should be able to. GPT-5 is incredibly slow, but once it pulls its finger out and actually, there's no orchestrator in this case, so we're not doing anything durable at this point. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't have any metadata about my exact model. But what is neat about this example is we can come over here to the agent, and so this is a very simple agent that in fact has nothing registered with it. It just has a system prompt about how it should answer. And it has one tool registered for fetch, which I'll show you why that's relevant in a minute. But we're able to augment it and make it much more powerful by registering an MCP server with it. So this is an MCP server running on FastMCP. But you can see the code for that over here, and it's basically this is the actual MCP server. So it has a bunch of FAQs about our PyAI. So I first gave this last week at our first PyAI meetup, and the idea is this has a bunch of FAQs about the meetup, and it exposes a search tool which lets you go and search that and get back the most relevant FAQs about the event. So no PydanticAI going on in here at all. It's just FastMCP. You could also use PydanticAI within a server if you wanted to, but we don't have to on this occasion. And we've used this BM25 package for doing the ranking of our FAQs. This is obviously not a scalable solution for a big database, but it means you have a self-contained example that should just work. And we, as I say, we come over here. The only thing we need to do, this one line of code here, you can get rid of when I was running it locally, one line of code to add as a tool set the MCP server over HTTP, and now our agent gets that FAQs tool exposed to it, and now it can go to questions about the events in the series effectively. So if I come back over to the UI, make sure I've restarted UVacorn, start a new conversation. When is the event in New York? Oh, I'm using GPT-5, so it's going to take half an hour, but anyway. Once that gets around, got there rather quickly. You see it's now called the search FAQs tool. You can see the input to the tool, so that the parameters it passed to that particular tool, the output value, and it's called it again. And it's now decided to go and call fetch on the Luma link that it got from the response. Now it's going to think for a bit, and hopefully it will, at some point, spit out some explanation, I hope. If we look at, in Logfire, at what it's doing, that is the wrong Logfire project. Okay, and it has indeed now come back and responded and told us when the next event is and given us the link to open. So for the most part, from the PydanticAI side, if you're running PydanticAI as an MCP client, it's incredibly simple. You just add this one line of code to your agent definition, and now you have an MCP server. And you can add multiple MCP servers, and we have some functionality for adding MCP servers and changing the prefix of tools if you have two different MCP servers and you don't want them to conflict. There are some more fancy things we can do with MCP, like sampling, which I often use as a demo example, mostly because it's the kind of most egregious example of what you might try to do in terms of tracing. So I'm going to look in this particular example. I mean, is this interesting? Or I mean, I can move on to something else if you want to see it. I can also show you how to run the example that I just showed you, because I know I skipped past it quite quickly. Do you want to see how to run that example? Okay, so it's a different repo. Unfortunately, we should definitely build it into Pydantic, but into the demo that you've seen. But if you go to our GitHub org and you search for chat, you will see this repo called AI Chat UI. And then I actually think that the interesting code is in, sorry, wrong branch, in this branch here. So I'll put this link here into the gist if anyone wants it. And obviously, I will at some point probably delete the Anthropic keys or just delete the key itself, but I will leave this around. But that link is in there. But the principle should be clone this repo, switch into the agent directory, which is so most of this is dedicated to basically building that as a React app for building that React UI you saw. But in the agent code, we have the code for running that UI. And so the actual logic for turning an agent into an endpoint that you can use within a React component like that is just this code here. So this is a fast API server. We just add one endpoint API/chat. We actually added a few more for like configuring the drop down of choice of different models. But effectively this Vercel AI adapter is past the agent of the incoming fast API request, the dependencies relevant here, the model we're going to choose, the built-in tools if we want it, and that's enough. And that will basically stream out from the request the SSE events that the Vercel library on the front end is expected to receive. Make sense? Happy to get that running. And then the other thing to say is the nice thing here is you don't have to deal at all with building the React app at all. We built that for you and served it up over JS Deliver. So if you want to get the front end running, you just basically get that one response and return that as from the root of your app, and now you basically get the React app running for you. And so this will allow us to basically distribute that chat application as a Python package without having to make you node and do a React build or any of that stuff. Does that make sense? So the actual MCP bit of this is relatively simple here, where we're adding it, where we actually have the agent, but it's a bit of there's a bit of. Sorry. If you want to, if you want to run this server, you should just clone that repo that I showed you, switch to the branch that I put in the link, and then you should just be able to go into the agent directory and follow these instructions. Just run this command here, basically. Go into agent. UV sync is technically redundant, and then run it. And again, this will be set up with multiple different models. So I think that is actually not true as of this branch, because I've used, I think, gateway in all of the examples. Yeah, the same PydanticAI gateway key I think should work, because if you look in the server, I've already set it up to use gateway in all three of the model choices. So would it be helpful to show the sampling example of MCP? So the term sampling is perhaps the worst choice of technical name for anything in MCP, possibly anything ever. It does not refer to sampling as anyone would normally refer to sampling. It is the idea of effectively proxying your LLM requests back through the client. And the idea is that if I have an MCP server which needs to use an LLM, I don't want to have to provision that server with my own account on gateway or on a foundational model. The client who's connecting, they should be the person who's going to pay. And you can imagine that in the case of I run some MCP server in the cloud somewhere to do some useful task, it needs to do AI, but I don't want to give my inference. The end user connecting can do it. Or in a large corporation, we may have many MCP servers, and we would like to attribute cost to the person using them, not to the team who built them. The problem really with sampling at the moment is that very few clients support it, and it is seen as a kind of dangerous thing that you have to switch on. Well, I don't think it's seen as dangerous. And so most servers don't implement it, and so it's a vicious cycle. In this case, we have control over the server. We can go and implement it. So this is a very simple example of a PydanticAI agent. It runs GPT 4.1 Mini. I use Mini because it's fast, and the thing it's going to do is going to otherwise be relatively slow. And I'm going to register one tool with it, again, via the MCP server. But this MCP server runs on standard I/O, so effectively runs locally as a sub-process question.
Is part of the reason you're running 4.10 Mini also to do with cost?
No, it's literally because when I give people demos of this, I don't want to wait for a minute and a half for it to generate a picture of a pink robot. And so I'm just going to ask the agent, create an image of a robot in a punk style. It should be pink. But the server that it is connected to, this generate SVG server, this is a Pydantic, this is an MCP server, but it has inside the tool call to generate image, we call another PydanticAI agent in this case. But the clever bit is that the model we pass when we run the agent is not the name of a model or an instance of one of our normal models. It is an instance of MCP sampling model, which takes as its argument the MCP session context. And now we can effectively use that as a model implementation within PydanticAI to do inference, but actually it's doing all the work of proxying that back through the client. And then it'll print out, in fact, in this case, the path to the robot image and return that path, and then it should return. Make sense? We're doing something slightly complicated. Should I run it or should I answer some questions? Questions?
Just make sure I understand. So that, I can use that basically, the user can put in their own credentials for whatever model, so that that session is what gets used to execute it rather than, me executing it on their behalf.
Yes, but they don't put in credentials, and the credentials don't get sent to the server. Instead,
Yeah, I mean like the session, their session essentially is the thing that gets used.
their MCP, their connection, right? And in particular, PydanticAI is taking care here. You see, we've called set sampling model here. And that is what has A, enabled sampling, and B, said use the same model in this case to do the. What we could do if we wanted was, I think this takes. Yeah, we could say use 4.1 here, but use whatever. I'm going to use just 4.1 mini for the sampling, but 4.1 for the main agent.
Okay.
And so all we're really doing is we're using the bidirectional communication that MCP provides to route our LLM request back through the client.
So what is the reason you chosen to separately set the sampling rule? To be able to have a choice?
Yeah, I mean, mostly you don't need to. Maybe I'll undo that. Mostly we just calling, we don't turn on sampling by default because people see it as a security risk, so you just have to call set sampling model, it basically enables sampling. Turning it on in this case, yeah. But you could turn it on with a different model if you wanted to.
Okay.
But I think that the cool bit in my opinion is this bit here where you're able to use PydanticAI, but use basically sampling as your way of doing inference. Obviously, in this case, it's PydanticAI connecting to PydanticAI, but because this is an open protocol, that doesn't have to be. One of those things can be PydanticAI. As long as the other one supports sampling, it will work. For the most part today, though, the downside of this is that right now, if I go and set up sampling on my server, and then as someone connects with Cursor or with Claude Code or virtually anything else, you'll just get back an error being like sampling is not supported. So you need to. It's probably fine in a corporate environment where you're like, guys, we all need to enable sampling because that's going to be our method for doing things. But if you're going to go and run a server in the Logfire MCP server, if we ran it hosted, we couldn't say it doesn't do any inference inside the model inside the server. But if it did, we couldn't try and use sampling because almost everyone's client will refuse it. But I know that FastMCP. How many people are aware of the confusion around what FastMCP is and the two different names?
I mean, I'm aware there is one. I couldn't describe it to you.
Okay, so FastMCP was built by my friend Jeremiah, who confusingly runs Prefect, who are an orchestration platform. He got very excited about MCP the week it came out, built FastMCP, which is an open source library for building MCP servers. A month later, David Pereira, who is the MCP creator, thought this was a better abstraction for defining MCP servers in Python. We'll pull FastMCP into the main MCP package. Then didn't really maintain it that much. So then 2 months later, Jeremiah got annoyed by constantly having these issues on his abandoned repo, being like, please can you restart this project? So he then restarted FastMCP. So now there is FastMCP 1 that is inside the MCP SDK, and there is FastMCP 2, which is a separate package. And I am using a mixture of the two without telling you which one is which because I haven't got around to it. And there's now FastMCP Cloud, which is a hosting provider built by Prefect, who are about to change their name because they do more MCP than Prefect stuff now. Does that make sense? Everyone clear?
No, but I understand. It's an exercise left to the reader.
Yeah, I'll leave that as an exercise to reader, and I will try and run this sampling example and see how we get on. What was the name of the library directory? So I'm going to run the client. So the point is that because of this standard I/O is another confusing name from within MCP. It will communicate over standard I/O, but what it actually more importantly means is it will run that server as a sub-process when making the requests. And it will then, you see, so we're making the second request to GPT 4.1, and if we come over and look, and on this one I will promise you that it's easier to understand with Logfire involved, although it is relatively complex. What's going on you see they're relatively similar colors, but we have distributed tracing, something back and forth between the client and the server, but we started in the client, we got a tools list from the server, then we called GPT 4.1 here, saying you've got this one tool available to you, image generator. It chose to call image generator. Then we did, on the client, we made the tool call. The client called the MCP server within that tool, which then called PydanticAI again, which called back to the client, went back to the server, and then back to the client, and then eventually spat out somewhere at least the name of a file that we should now be able to open. We may or may not get a pretty image of a robot. Oh, it's a really boring image of a robot. But if we'll do this. I did this the other day, and it did much worse. But I'll try and do. I can't spell Anthropic.
Anthropic. I would say.
It doesn't want Claude Instant 1. It's suggesting for me.
Surely you won't sue if you create a company called Anthropic, right?
Why?
Create a company called Bill.
Have I spelled that right?
Start a company closed AI.
That's just a. Did you see that? Did you see?
Make it open source.
That's right.
Sam sucks to suck.
Did you see Gary Marcus said yesterday, when the dust has settled, we'll all refer to him as Scam Altman. I thought that was like.
It's pretty good.
To be clear, before anyone sues me, I'm not claiming that. I'm just reporting the news.
This is not financial advice.
I'm just a messenger.
What's the? I can't remember. Oh, I've done the wrong.
Uncle Sam.
Let me. Okay, so it will now run. Should do the same thing, but with a bit of luck, we'll generate a more interesting image of a pink robot. But more to the point, I hope, demonstrate that sampling is, if not a good idea, then at least an idea.
Thank you for showing this. I never seen something working ever in my life.
And
I don't know if there's anything supporting it.
I think it's truthfully, one of the reasons I demonstrate it is it's a cool demonstration of distributed tracing working back and forth between the client and the server, not because it's actually something people are gonna like go off and use that much. I mean, but again, it's one of those things. If it's not supported, no one will use it, and then no one will support it. Moment of truth. A bit better picture of a robot.
That's the evil robot.
It's pink and it's kind of cyber.
The other one was nice.
Except for this one is a line. The other one's kind of off-center.
Yeah, I mean,
Guys are actually attached.
That's right.
But the head is not attached to the body.
No, there's a bow tie. You just can't see the neck.
It's got some oval bow tie.
glorifies the robot.
Suddenly, I've discovered something you're all interested in and have an opinion on. This is what it took.
That's the real reason you shut it down.
One of the other places I have another example, coming back to the SQL generation question that we had earlier. One of the other, it doesn't actually require MCP at all, and it definitely doesn't require sampling, but like one of the things I've seen work quite well is that if you have a tool that basically effectively goes off and makes a SQL query, you can put all of the context about the SQL schema and how to write the SQL and the error handling and how to deal with that into your main agent, which blocks your main agent, particularly if it has lots of other tools. Or you can have one tool which basically takes as its argument human description of the data that I want, and then it goes and generates the SQL. It does the loop of like fixing the error, and then it returns the results. And so you basically hand off the work of generating the SQL to some sub-agent that's the only thing it does. I think I have an example of that somewhere, but it's a neater way of. I don't actually know if that's in this repo. I think it's not, but I can show that one as well. But like, it's mostly neat, not so much for the MCP stuff, although I used it with sampling, but because it shows this like basically delegation of responsibility to an agent with needs less, that's doing one specific thing and has lots of context on that. Shall I show that, or should we do some evals?
Show that.
Okay, I'm showing that. So I am going to we have this like mess of different repos where I have at some point dumped code in a hurry when I'm about to give a talk. Oh, that's really not what I want at all. Okay. And I'm looking for AI engineer.
Do you use agents in your coding workflow?
Yes, I use Claude Code a lot. An awful lot of the UI for Gateway was built with Claude. And in fact, quite a lot of the back end was built with Claude as well, as in I built a little micro web framework that allowed it to basically forced it to generate type-safe endpoints, and then it would just go and spit out those endpoints and write the SQL very efficiently. But I think I'm like in to spend some time thinking and then generate your prompt, like think hard about it, not the like other end of the spectrum, which is just like prompting cursor continually to try and change something, as in spend time on your Claude Code implementation kind of take.
So like an Albert Einstein could spend 90% of the problem, and 90% of your time thinking about the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I like the idea of calling it, that makes it sound like a much more sophisticated answer.
I mean, especially if you have a British accent, like, you nail it. How would you define agentic? Because a lot of the stuff that the Venture Lab is doing is already agentic-like, even when you call it agent.
Everyone else here has to listen to my definition of an agent joke again, but since you asked.
You promised me good stuff.
So there are three definitions of what agent means. There's the AI definition, which is an LLM calling tools in a loop. That is the like Barry Zhang definition. I have some slides here that will probably show that if I, let me do this. That's not what I want. Anyway, the high level idea is that's the definition of like code calling tools in a loop. The second definition is the kind of infra definition, which is an agent is basically a microservice.
Yeah.
And then the business definition is something that can replace a human and take their salary. When I talk about an agent here, I talk about the AI definition of code calling tools in the loop. But I'm aware that there are definitely multiple other definitions.
So if like the model you're calling will automatically search the web if it doesn't know.
Yes.
It's like an agent calling an agent. But
Yeah, let me just try really quickly and show you.
if it's too much of a tangent, we can just use them.
Yeah, so this code is taken almost exactly from, so this is Barry Zhang's talk from the beginning of the year. If I just open one of these. So this was his definition of an agent from his talk at AI Engineer in February, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. This was the code he had on the next slide, which did make sense to me. This is his like pseudocode for what an agent is. And what you see, and what turns out to actually be half the problem, is that there's a bug, which is that the loop never ends. And of course, the real hard bit of this is when do you end the loop. And that's often the tricky bit of like, when do I get to like, if the model returns text, is that the end, or is that just it commenting on what it's doing along the way? And that's one of the, like, that's probably the most opinionated and therefore bit that people don't always agree with in PydanticAI. So we have, like, it's easy if you have structured outputs because whatever structured output mechanism you're using, if they reply with structured output, you're like, okay, it's finished. But other than that, if it's a pure text agent, it's not always clear what the definition is. But anyway, let me go back to, so this is the, this is a PydanticAI agent for basically researching Python packages. It's a nice subject for me because we have a lot of downloads. And so it has you would imagine in the real world it would have lots of tools registered for like looking up repos or looking at number of stars. In this case, it has one tool registered which allows it to go and look at the number of downloads or indeed query data about downloads from PyPI. And so what you will see when you look at the tool, which is defined in this case as an MCP tool, is, Jesus, when we come down here, This is what I mean. No, that's not what I mean at all. When we, where am I looking? Okay, so this is our MCP server, and you see that it takes as its input simply a question. So it does not ask the parent agent to do hard work to work out the SQL that it needs to generate to find the data. It just says, what is the question you are trying to answer? And so the parent client has a very easy time because it just asks a question. How many times was Pydantic downloaded last year? And then this MCP server, and in particular the PydanticAI model, then does the hard yards of turning that query into that question into a SQL query. And so you see here that it has a whole bunch of context from on the schema of the database, and on some example queries, and on how to run those queries. And then you'll see we have an output validator in PydanticAI, which is running and is basically connecting to BigQuery, running the query. If we get back an error, you'll see we log that with MCP, but more to the point, we use model retry, which is the prompt point for basically triggering a model to try again, giving it the SQL error, and so it can use this to try and work out what to do. And I haven't run this code for some time, and today most things I run seem to fail, so you get some excitement of me trying to run it. I'll run it once, and if it doesn't work, we'll move on. But UV run, and it's called libs client, and presumably libs client has in it somewhere. How many times has Pydantic been downloaded this year? You can see I'm an egotist. And you can see it doing stuff. And if I go and open this repo, you see that it's got to calling, you see how old it is, it's Claude 4.0, Claude Sonnet 4. It's like 2 months old, Jesus. And you can see the SQL that it generated, wrapped with a bunch of text that I hope we've managed to successfully chop out. Then it ran the BigQuery query. We have BigQuery instrumented, so you can see exactly. Well, you can see some stuff. The BigQuery instrumentation isn't very good because it's Google, and then you can see it comes back with a total number of downloads, 4.1 billion.
That's an incredibly impressive number of downloads.
See why I chose this example.
You wrote a tool that gives you congratulations.
That's just called an AI these days. Sorry? 4.14, yeah. Hmm?
I'm sure it's not a hallucination.
Well, what's lovely about this is we can go and look at the SQL that it generated. And the SQL that it generated was select count star as number of downloads from the correct table, where the file.project is Pydantic, and where date is the current date. That appears to be correct. So this is part of BigQuery. BigQuery have a table where you can go and run any query, including in one of their public data sets that they like pay to query it to them. But and we should be able to see. What's crazy is that actually about half the downloads seem to be attributed to being a dependency. The other half of the downloads, it's very hard to know. What they don't have is like, if you're transitive dependency, what are you a transitive dependency of, or are you a transitive dependency? But we should be able to see if we look at the top level run of the agent. So the raw output from the tool, again, we use format as XML when we return the like raw rows, because obviously the query could have been something more complicated, not just a single number. If we count the zeros, that looks like 4.14. It looks like you got it right.
Yeah. The thing to remember about these downloads, it's like every time anyone does a pip install, it's incrementing 1, right?
Yep.
So that includes every like GitHub CI run,
Yep.
right? So like that number of users, no. Every time somebody has hit the endpoint.
But you mean if you look at the downloads, right? I mean, this is like
It's still amazing, to be clear. Like it's still huge.
if you look at Pydantic's, yeah, I mean, if you look like a normal, like,
How many of those are agents and bots? Just
yeah, I mean, that's right, because you can see, look, this is like, it's moved number 25 to number 20 in terms of most downloaded package this year. So it's like it's ballooned its relative popularity. That is like Python.
It's on the current trajectory. I mean, you know.
Something is going to happen.
Person on Earth
1
will have
trillion
used-
downloads. Fastest to 1 trillion.
What?
Always with NVIDIA.
Yeah, basically.
Because this is a Pydantic talk, how would you take this output and massage or force it to just return as an int that number?
If I mean, should we try?
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. I was like, this is extremely cool, and then could you make it a deeper process by saying, all I want out of here is the int?
Yep. If I'm going to say on the agent output type int,
Interesting. Oh, you're going hardcore uppercase.
Yeah,
uh,
your children depend on it.
I have no idea whether case matters, but like it's
No,
clearer
it
to me.
does, like, at least it used to. It's markdown also.
There we are.
Depends on the model.
Returns the end.
Hey, that's very okay. And all you had to do was add the. That's neat.
Yeah. So if you look in what we actually did here, if you look at so there were 2 calls to the model, and you'll see here that it had 1 tool registered with it, final result, and it was told it had to call. Well, there was another tool from MCP, but like the local tool is this one, and so this schema, it was told it had to call one of the tools, and this was one of them, and so it's basically forced to return an integer, and then we'll run Pydantic validation over the result. So even if the JSON schema does not strictly define everything you might want, as in you might say this number needs to be greater than 0, or you might say this output needs to be a set or something like that, and that's where Pydantic comes in. Also, they don't always even match the JSON schema unless it's strict, which makes things slower.
Cool.
Um,
Well, it has to go and validate against the schema.
No, because it uses, well, the way that models do strict structured output is custom grammars, where you basically adjust the weights of each token at each position to enforce JSON schema. And so the model has to return an integer, has to return a decimal value. The schema for this grammar for this one would be very simple because it's just like every value has to be a decimal. But you can imagine that the schema for like the grammar setup for some very complex like JSON object gets pretty hellish.
It almost sounds like you can write a regular expression for this.
So OpenAI GPT-5's custom grammars allow you to literally pass a JSON a regex of what it's allowed.
But, and you can see the weights or you can't see the weights?
So if you run it locally, you can use something like Outlines, which is a .txt project, to basically do this on local models.
Yeah.
If it's OpenAI, then you can't see it. It's like deep inside their stuff.
Yeah.
Anthropic announced support for custom grammars, but they only support JSON on day before yesterday. So it's like,
So how, then it seems like it's no longer just stochastic. It seems like it's going to be deterministic, and that seems unlike a system.
I mean, and of course, sorry?
It's a translation between the stochastic and the deterministic.
Yeah.
Right, that's where it's happening. So it's not that you're not getting stochastic output, but you're trying to force what that non-deterministic output is into a deterministic.
It can still hallucinate though, right?
Well, basically.
Yeah.
It's not how,
Yeah, you can still, I mean, you still need Pydantic validation. One, because you might put a field function, like a field validator like the one I showed earlier of like must be in the 19th century. You can't enforce that as a grammar. Or if you could, it's going to be too complicated to do. And also there are numerous types you might want out, like a set or a tuple that you literally can't get from, or a path that you can't get from JSON. So you have to use Pydantic to do the upcasting bit.
why can't you get it
Well, there's no,
from raw JSON?
Yeah, there's no JSON type for a date, right? So I want a date back, what do I do? Like, I could have, technically, even if I had a perfect enforcement of the schema, I'll get back a ISO 8601 string of the date in JSON.
From your experience, I see that you're really using XML here. Like, do you find XML to be a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more deterministic compared to JSON?
So my in this particular case, it's not necessary, but if you have some like very complex object that you want to pass to an LLM, my theory is, and I've seen, other people have said this, I'm not going to say I've run some complex eval and found this, but like, how do I know as a model that I've got to the end of this chunk of text? It's a heck of a lot easier if I see a closing XML bracket than if I just see I have to count the number of like double quotes I'm in, or count the number of close brackets to work out which part of some object I'm in. So my impression is that XML works pretty well. Also, you don't have to, with XML for the like format as XML is like, we should probably call it XML-ish, as in it does a little bit of work to like not allow you to escape XML within it, but it doesn't go and convert every value inside the text to correct XML types, which makes it easier for the model to understand. Whereas if you have JSON and you have lots of double quotes and it's now got all these backslashes and does JSON support code? Depends what JSON encoder you use, right? But now suddenly my emojis are now becoming like whatever the syntax is in JSON for /u 4 digits. Stuff like that confuses the model. So I find those things are presumably easier with XML-ish stuff like this. But I don't pretend to have done any scientific research that it's better.
Have you used tune at all?
No, because people started talking about it 2 days ago. I'm really hoping it goes away. I spent a year and a half building a very, very fast JSON parser inside Pydantic, which does SIMD and does everything else, and is probably the fastest JSON parser in Rust and in Python. I really don't want to have to go and do that for some other format that's going to last a week. So we'll see.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you like returning a table in this format, it's ballooning your context and all the.
Yeah, but what people miss is that tables are the worst thing possible for models.
Yeah.
So like I have this example where this is a complete distraction, but I think a relevant point to make. Take a markdown table, and then imagine how a model sees it. Not as a nice grid on the table on the page that you can view as an image, but instead as everything spread out as one long line, and try and work out what value over there relates to what column. It's completely fucking impossible. So what's JSON doing? Well, it's basically giving you a list of dicts, and now I know what the key is and what the value is. So all of those extra tokens that Toon is getting rid of are incredibly valuable for making the model good. And that plus the fact the models are trained on JSON, I cannot believe that it's actually better in most cases. Sure, it's fewer tokens, but like who cares about the number of tokens for the most part?
Yeah, actually, like when you work for like Scale AI or these other human in the loop or reinforced human learning, that like the requirement is that you use Markdown or XML because it's the way that the models then ingest the positive example. And so like I fundamentally agree that like yeah, you might save a few tokens, but then you might need multiple tokens, right? And so like when someone says like I work at a Fortune 500 company and my team of 7, like when our stuff went down, like no one could buy e-commerce. And I was the only engineer for 2 years that was like using AI, and no one on my team knew. And I would get comments like, great code. And then the 7 other engineers all told me and had an extreme argument that like AI can't write good code. But because you don't know how to interact with the model, like the data is important when you're creating, the process is important. But then ultimately it's like how you interact with content.
Should we talk about evals? Or anything else on MCP that anyone wants to see? Okay, let's do a break. That sounds like a great idea. Check if my evals example actually works first. Great.
Eval your evals.
Yep.
So I got to run this code, but this is not responding back. I mean, I see like the requests are going and it's like they all want.
Yeah, I saw this as well, and we need to fix why it's not behaving. Where are you, running that server? Okay. And have you set the the PydanticAI gateway API key?
Yeah, so it took it from there only. So it asked me, right?
And it's set?
It asked, right? Please
No, that's for
statement.
Logfire. So have you set the PydanticAI gateway one?
Oh, not for this one.
Yeah,
No,
so
that's
you will
all.
need to set that one as well, because I'm afraid this comment is out of date. So if I come over here and I
I'll just export the same thing.
yeah, this one maybe will work. Yeah, I'm afraid it's really unclear that it's not erroring. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
If you reload, if you just try,
Reloading.
yeah, that should now be working.
Oh, that's
You won't have seen that yet. Sorry about that.
oh, no problem. Thank you so much.
All right.
ask anything? Just say like it does not have the access to real-time weather, and so I mean, how we can extend it to get that the real-time data and
You should be able to turn on web search here.
okay. And if
But
I'm-
also, yeah, that should be the simplest way of giving it. Or you could register tools, as we did before with Tervillia, as I showed you, like as in any form of way of adding tools to give it some context.
okay. And if I want to integrate it with some of the MCP server through related to work, and I want to get that data to fetch to the.
Yeah. So we have an example in the code of registering one MCP server.
Okay.
That was that PyAI one. You should also be able to, I think we have examples of how to do MCP servers with auth. So if you go into the agent directory, and then into, I think, the chatbot directory. And then if you look at agent.py, you'll see this has one MCP server registered with it here, which is this one here, which was I built just to give information about those meetups. So if you ask it about like, when's the next PyAI meetup in New York, it should be able to answer.
Oh, okay. So similarly, I can just
The point is,
register more servers.
yeah. Or you can register tools, as we've shown earlier today. Like it has one tool here to fetch. So if you asked it, like, what's the contents of example.com, it should be able to fetch that.
Okay.
But you would obviously add more tools to give it more context of the real world.
Which one is there already there?
This one here, you see, we've said agents.tool, and we've registered one tool called fetch, which will get a URL
Okay.
and return
Okay.
the text of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which version of the JSON draft schema do you use?
3.1, I think. No, 7, whatever the latest. 7? Something like 7 from Pydantic. I mean, turns out that like some people, they're not that different. Like none of the, it's weird to say, but they basically, it doesn't matter that much because like models within are much smaller than nuances than the like differences of what models, what the different LLMs can support or what the different model providers.
Do you use any conditional logic
How do you mean?
in your JSON schema?
What do you mean by conditional logic?
So like in draft 7, they introduced like you can have conditional logic, like if A.
I think not. I think we try our best to support everything that that is needed to define Pydantic models.
Yeah.
As in, but the main places, originally the main place it was used was it by Fast API to generate the Open API schema, and now the main place it's used is in like stuff to LLMs.
Okay.
And I don't hear about the draft logic much, so. Sorry, 1 minute. Sorry.
Where can I find the code for this one?
If you're in that, are you on the branch? Yes, you are. So if you look here, go down a bit. I think that there's a. Oh, I tell you, if you go to my GitHub.
The starter?
No, if you go to GitHub and go to Samuel Colvin. And if you just go to a browser and open github.com/Samuel Colvin. No, github.com/Samuel Colvin. And that's gist. Yeah. And you go to repos. Yeah, it's this one here, PyAI MCP.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Sorry? This is the evals running, so I've got something to show you because they take quite a long time to run.
Oh, I see. Which GitHub repo is that in? Which GitHub repo is that in?
This is in the same repo. There's literally next to the 20 questions example.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why that API key has got disabled. Maybe we blew through our credit. I'll try and running it without for a minute. On which one?
That is PyAI MCP.
Yeah, it's just the main branch. Shall I carry on evals?
Yeah, we're good.
It's running. There's some stuff to see. I'm not saying it's all perfect. So this is roughly, well, this is actually not. This is importing from the 20 questions code that we started running at the very beginning of the day. And then this is building an eval to see how different models perform at playing 20 questions. There's a bug which we will come to, but that's kind of secondary to the point here. This is using the Pydantic evals library, which, as you will have heard, one of the things we care about as a company is type safety, and it tries to be a type safe library for building evals. So at a high level, this is trying to be PyTest for stochastic functions. So we have some integration with Logfire in the form of we can emit OpenTelemetry data, but we are not. You can view the output locally. This is running now, and you can see earlier where it didn't go wrong. You can see the performance of the evals locally in your terminal. And obviously, if you don't have Logfire set up, you can view the output or some version of the output locally. At the same time, all of the data we're emitting is OpenTelemetry, so in theory, you can send it into any platform, but it won't look nice. But the main point here is that we care about this idea of building a type-safe way of defining our cases and our data sets. So a data set is, if you take the PyTest paradigm A data set is like all of my tests, or a file of tests. A case is like an individual test, and then an experiment is the equivalent of like running my tests. So a run. So we define our data set here with some cases. We give them a name, which is obviously always a string. We give them an input, which is a generic, which needs to match the input generic on the data set. So we end up with this type-safe definition, and then we can also add evaluators to our data set. We can also add evaluators if we want to an individual case, if we so wish. I haven't done that in this case. And we can add multiple different evaluators. And those evaluators can be either return booleans, which we display as assertions, or they can display floats, which we display as metrics, or they can return a dictionary of keys, which we use as the name, and then values which can either be booleans or floats. In this case, we have two evaluators. These are called question count, which takes the play result, which is what's effectively, well, I don't know what we call this generic, but is the output, sorry, the result type. So they get basically the result type. They can look at context.output, which is the output of running the function we're evaluating, and they return based on that some kind of like assertion or metric. We have built-in evaluators for things like LLM as a judge, but you can also register your own ones, which is what I've done in this case. And you can build, of course, your own LLM as a judge. That's just an implementation of the evaluator type. We're just inheriting from here. In this case, we've used a data class, but we don't necessarily need to. But like, yeah, you can see we could technically define our evaluators which have their own parameters, which I guess become the rubric for how we would become, for example, the rubric in an LLM as a judge. We don't have anything in this case. And yeah, we have play result, which is the result what we get from our stochastic function. And so fundamentally, what we end up doing is we need a function that is async that we're going to call. And that's all we're really evaluating. That function can be to do with LLMs. It can be not to do with LLMs. It can be using PydanticAI. It can be using LangPain or any other AI library of your choice. Fundamentally, it's just something back from. The only kind of regard in which so mostly we just treat that as a black box. It takes inputs, it gives us back outputs. We have some type-safe way of defining evaluators. There are a few exceptions to that, like black box model, which is that if you come over to the evals documentation, if you look at evaluators, you look at built-in evaluators, we have some that basically you can define evaluators based on the spans from the OpenTelemetry generated during calling that function. So you can look and go and say, was this particular tool called, which you might want to do. Basically a way of like inspecting within a tool what it did. And obviously stuff like performance and stuff like that, which we'll always measure time and tokens. Those get measured by automatically as metrics, but we can also add some more. That make some sense? You'll see this has been running now for some time, and it is running in a loop endlessly for some reason. It's running over all the models, so that makes sense. Okay, so it does make sense what it's doing now. So we have in this case, we have one wrapper function around our actual play function, which is in particular, it's slightly ugly if it raises an exception. It doesn't actually break the evals library, but it's kind of cleaner if we can return in the case of reaching the limit that we had 25 steps rather than just exception. And then, we return some basically data about the messages exchanged, which are useful. So this is our little wrapper function around the like simple play method that is the kind of original core to everything. And then, we're going to run that full 20 questions game over, in this case, 5 different models, which is why it's continuing to run. And so you see each time it finishes, and it has now finished. And so it's run effectively 5 experiments. And we can see the outputs here, so we can see the question count. So the other thing to say is our cases here were a bunch of different objects that we were going to go and the input here is effectively the secret that the model is trying to find. And the name is just our human readable name, which in this case are the same. In general, they probably wouldn't be the same thing. And so we're going to run each of our cases for each of our models in this case, and we'll generate 5 experiments. And within each experiment, we should have however many 6 different cases that we ran. Pydantic evals will automatically take care of running these in parallel. So when we call evaluate, it will go and run all of the cases in parallel. We assume that this is async. The only other thing to say here is that we have this concept of override, which is a PydanticAI concept, which allows us to basically override the model that is used within an agent without having to pass that all the way through. So it's effectively, it's a context manager that lets us customize the model particularly for cases like unit testing or evals, where we don't want to have to add hook points throughout our code to pass the model around. We just want to be able to overwrite it for running evals. And so these have now finished. We get some description of what's happened here. You can see that it took 16 questions to get to potato, 12 questions to get to man, 7 questions to get to woman. I'm not going to say whether that means anything. But the other bit here is to say that obviously if I can find Logfire, I've got too many Pydantic tabs open. We can come now into the evals tab of Logfire, and we can see our evals cases. And I apologize, it's going to be incredibly ugly because there's no. I haven't put a dataset name in this case, but there's no way of getting this on the screen without it being. It would look much nicer on my big screen, or even on a MacBook, let alone on a proper screen compressed onto a monitor. It's going to look fairly fuzzy and hard to review. But you can see, it's just fucked itself up again because of the small screen. The first thing to see, which is weird, so this is effectively each experiment that we have run. And first thing you can see, which is weird, is that Gemini 2.5 Flash has passed 100% of the time. That is a bug in my implementation, where if Gemini Flash runs out of ideas, it just replies and says, I don't know. We've taken that to be success, whereas all of the other models faithfully continue until they either succeed or hit the limit. So we probably need some way of and I'm sorry, there's a nasty bug where it jumps to be narrower periodically. I think we reload the screen every X seconds, and that every time it reloads, it snaps. So I apologize for that bit. And then beyond that, you can see, perhaps not surprisingly, Sonnet 4.5 did best. But the interesting thing is we can take, let's say, sorry about that, 2 models, and now we can, let's go into one in particular. Now I've got those selected, we can go and look at the comparative performance of the 2 different models. So again, this looks incredibly ugly on this tiny screen because there's an awful lot of data to describe, but hopefully you get the idea of the kind of thing that we're displaying. And if you look at it on a big screen, it will be interesting, but you see the basically graph describing the metrics, both the metrics we have measured, in this case, average case duration, assertions here, but case duration is obviously a metric that we're automatically recording. You don't have to go and add the evaluator for us to measure time, and so you can see that Sonnet 4.5 was significantly slower than GPT 4.1, which we might expect. You can see, obviously, input tokens is much bigger than output tokens, but noticeably fewer input tokens. I guess that's because it's on average taken fewer cases, and so hasn't taken as many tokens for. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense at all. It should be the other way around, because I think, let's look through and see if we can work out what's going on. You can see number of requests, which we also record, and cost. But the real point here is to, I'll hide the summary, we'll get into the individual results, and you can see here the success case, they both succeeded or both failed, but here you see a case where they behave differently. So one, which was Sonnet, succeeded, and 2, which is GPT 4.1, failed. And we should be able to see, so that's assertions. We should be able to see over here, question count. You can see that GPT 4.1 got to 25 and then failed. And we can see input tokens. So, yeah, and obviously, the neat thing ultimately is that this is just OTel data, and so we can dive right into the particular span that spans that represent a particular case and investigate exactly what happened and why it behaved the way it did. And so we can see the particular exchange it had with the LLM and where it went wrong, and dig into exactly what's happened. And this allows us to, both on a basically compare two. You can compare more than 2 runs, but as you can imagine, that works well on a big screen. It'll completely fall over on this tiny screen. But you should get the idea of how even from basic summary.
Is it possible to do an evaluation based on variation of prompts?
Yes. Yeah, so you need to, effectively, you just need to, as in this case, we changed the model as the input, you would need to change the prompt and run multiple different cases with different prompts and see how they perform. As in, you can either pass the prompt as a context var or you can pass it as an input to the function. In this case, the input was just, so the input comes from the...
Can it be part of the data set?
The prompts.
The prompt.
So it could be, yeah. You could define it in the cases as the prompts. No, you wouldn't want to do that because the point is you want to change the prompt between different experiments, not between different cases. So there is a way to pass, either you can use context vars or you can pass, there's another argument here, metadata, which you can pass through where you can pass the prompt, or you can use an override type thing as we've done here. Or you could, the other simplest way of all would be to use partial to wrap your function that takes the prompt and thereby have a simple function here with the right signature. The proper answer to that question is we're about to add managed variables into Logfire, and they will both allow you to manage variables from within the Logfire platform, but also they'll allow you to basically control managed variables from a context var, just as we're doing override here. And so you would basically override when you run a particular experiment with change my prompt to this. That make sense?
Could you do that programmatically?
Yes. And so the one of the use cases of this system will be RL style prompt optimization using Jepper, which we're working with the Jepper guy to basically make that library bring prompt optimization into PydanticAI. That's a good reaction. Thank you.
So can an outside system call these evaluators as well? Like from outside, can we see code and say, hey, here's the data, can you evaluate?
So I don't know the exact internal signature of an evaluator. You should be able to call them from outside of our evaluate function. For the most part, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to call it via evaluate. If you want to put a lot of logic into a function and be able to call it from somewhere else, I would define that function and then call it within an evaluator.
No, I understand. Even if I would call this evaluate from a system that's outside of,
Do you mean when you say call the evaluate, do you mean call like this evaluate the dataset method? Yeah, you could run that code wherever you liked.
So the point is that there are other systems where, I don't want to run the code in that system. I want to run code here in Pydantic. But I want it's like a webhook or something, right? You have some data you want to say, hey, how is this data? Can you evaluate and say if this is?
You mean as in the service is running somewhere and you want to evaluate it? So obviously, your eval function here it happens to be a function which runs some local logic and calls an LLM, but that function could be making a request from API to go and query the performance of your system.
API that can be called.
there should be no, I mean, it's Python code, there's no reason why you couldn't call evaluate inside some long-running task. Whether that is I mean, I think like, there's still work to do on like what is the, I think we have somewhere in our docs, we say like evals are an emerging art and science, and anyone who thinks that they know how it should be done can safely be ignored. And I think we're still in the process of working out the best way of doing evals. So this is an answer to the offline evals, improve the performance of my system, or get confidence in the performance of my system before I release it. Exactly. The other case of evals is the online evals, where you're basically running some code in production. Now that could of course be staging, that could be a POC, and then running evals against that system that's running and basically building these data sets from well, in our case, from data in Logfire. That is also the managed variables and the annotation queue stuff required for basically online evals are two of our big priorities this year as a company. So I think very likely we'll have managed variables by the end of the year. Less certain whether we will have annotation queue by the end of the year.
Use case I was talking about is the latter one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's been lots of hot air exchanged on Twitter about whether or not evals are a good idea. Swix likes saying how terrible they are. I'm told that is him specifically negging some person who he doesn't like, but rather than actually a particularly profound opinion. My take is everyone who says evals, I mean, what the intelligent take seems to be everyone who thinks evals are a bad idea doesn't understand what evals are. And I mean, I kind of get that. At the same time, I know lots of like coding platforms have, lots of the coding agents have very few evals. I know speaking to Lovable earlier this year, they were like, it's all vibes. We have no evals.
It's the bugs and feedback.
So I had amazing, so I don't know if anyone saw, is this, this is recorded, fuck. I'll tell you the story later. I'll tell you a related story at some later. Where were we?
I do have one. So I'm thinking about this stuff a lot. So one of the
There's coffee upstairs if anyone wants it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but we got the coffee hours.
Not when we needed it. Before they take it down again.
Sorry, you were saying?
No, yeah, no worries. So one of the problems that I've been bumping into, like I'm going to continue on with this example. Like here, you're basically doing an evaluation on 6 cases versus 5 models. Let's just assume that your scenario is something like that. It's figuring out which one of those 5 models is the best.
Yep.
The problem with that is like if you were to be like data science rigorous, you would all of a sudden need to, run this multiple times.
Yep.
In order to, measure the statistical significance, blah blah blah, all of this crap.
Yep.
Right? So I guess the first thing is like I struggle doing that because this is where it comes the comment of like, okay, can I just go into the MCP server and grab all of these evaluations so I can write something that I can do that?
Yeah, so I asked the team, and they said that there's a logfire.evals table, and I tried to query it, and I got table does not exist. So, did
Oh, this is live, so we can do that.
And recorded. And the next round of funding.
we may not have the API endpoint right now, but we will do.
Like we can chat about this.
We will. I mean, we definitely mean to expose it as SQL. We have some clever stuff that means that in FusionFire, our database, we can query a Postgres table, which is where evals live. Obviously, you can already technically query everything because, like I showed here, like ultimately evals all come through as traces. Sure. It's not the nicest view of it, but you could get it.
Yeah, they're there somehow.
But also the evaluations experiments table, whatever it's called, should be queryable. Sorry.
Well, you say obviously it's a SQL database rather than non-SQL.
So Logfire's thing is that everything is exposed to SQL, and we find that super useful for solving a whole bunch of problems. So you missed, unfortunately, I showed when you were in the room. I showed that you can use Logfire MCP, which basically speaks SQL and can go and investigate bugs and fix them just by like querying our data with SQL, and that's where this question came up.
Yeah.
And the follow-up to this would be, like, are you considering doing some sort of experiment that wraps like this logic around that A/B test? So basically are you guys considering?
So the principle of managed variables, which I don't want to overhype as an idea, but I do think that they're really exciting. So they're built on an open protocol called Open Feature, which is basically like A/B testing open protocol, which is not particularly exciting, which is not particularly well known because A/B testing is not very cool right now because all of the oxygen of everything is taken out by AI. But actually, it's a very neat protocol for doing exactly this thing. And one of the things it obviously has as a primitive is A/B testing. So giving some percentage of traffic one variable versus another, or one set of variables versus another. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I think this comes back to your question of like running it once is not enough. You actually need to go and run it tens of times, maybe even hundreds of times. To I was going to say, that's a stats question.
It's just like, I'm literally thinking about these things, and it depends on your standard deviation. You have a score, you define that score. That score in this particular example, it will be like 6, right? Because you have 6 cases. So if you add 100, then you have like a more granular thing. But then you want to measure difference between the averages, standard deviations, and this is a hot mess. In order for you to say like, this is actually better.
Yeah, if you get to a point where you get an answer within the standard deviation at all, is it guaranteed the next time you run it?
No.
Well, it's.
Yeah, no, it's
I mean, it's precisely one of the reasons we use this 20 questions example is that it's exactly this kind of like treasure hunt example where it can make itself go wrong very quickly. One of the cases I had was car was the result, and the third question it asked was, is it bigger or smaller than a car? And the other model responded either yes or no, because that's the only options it had. From then on, it could never said car because it was like, I know it's smaller than a car. And so there are situations like that which mess it up, which is exactly the kind of thing that's like hard about real world problems. And this 20 questions encapsulates exactly this case. So slight side note, but I think very relevant. I went to the hackathon on Saturday, arranged by Theory Ventures and Brian Bischoff, who is their head data scientist, who is basically old school data scientist and somewhat about everyone saying these things can be solved with AI. And so he has spent a year building this like world simulator which generates entire data sets as if you are a large company. And so the beginning of the hackathon is basically he gives you 97,000 Parquet files and says, go and answer these questions. And you then have like 30 questions to go and answer, and everyone had to go and build an agent. And I failed dismally because I tried to build it with PydanticAI. Everyone else, those who succeeded, basically just pointed Claude code at it and said, try and use DuckDB to answer questions. And apparently the real reason he came up with this was he had seen, whilst running Theory Ventures, numerous different, oh fuck, maybe I'm not supposed to say this. Can we clip any bits out of the recording? Anyway, no, I think this is presumably reasonably public, that he basically, his view was that all of these like BI agent that can investigate your data actually can't solve real stats. And that was a far more complex example. I spent $15 by mistake because I just asked like my AI to run one particular task, and in about a minute and a half it spent $20. But like, so the case was much bigger, but it was fundamentally the same problem, right? It's this like treasure hunt of like, go and find a file, run that SQL query, then go and look in this other file and try and do a join, and et cetera, and you may get to an answer. And lots of real world examples come out to be similar to this like treasure hunt style case.
Isn't that like the purposes of multi-shot prompting is you like give it a template of like good examples, right? So if you were to abstract that and you were to find like patterns that work, you can give it both the context and then the pattern, and you can essentially do it like different levels of abstracted.
Yeah, without speaking for Brian, I think his take is that all the people who claim to have done that haven't actually solved it for real big, real world problems. Like the number of examples that they need is vast, right?
Yeah. But API is going to fix everything.
Right. But like that seems like a legitimately very hard problem. It's not like if we tether things together correctly. Like as in the 20 questions should be solvable. Like everyone in this room could play any of these 20 questions and get it right, I suspect, in 20 questions. And so I think that in answer to, I think there's a legitimate feature request for Pydantic evals, which is how many times to rerun a case. And instead of us showing like house 40 times down this page because I want to run each case 40 times. I just say house and it says 40 next to it, and now it says a percentage of successes. Maybe that's already supported and I just haven't found the feature. But sounds like you've tried it harder than I have and it doesn't.
I mean, I haven't looked, but I am just basically manually doing that. another feature would just be like being able to at least grab this from the Yellow stage and put it into like an Excel spreadsheet or something.
Yep.
To just begin to do that math. But right now I had to manually grab the number.
Oh shit. Yeah, we can sort that for you soon.
That's okay.
But I do believe it makes sense to show multiple cases, and then each of these values basically becomes the like average or a,
Yeah.
Like a weighted, like a expected value.
Yeah.
Funny comment on like the stochasticity comment. You were like on the potato one, like mine went all the way to question 45. I configured it to go to 50, and then like the last 15 questions was: is it a baked potato? Is it a fried potato? It's a potato. It never actually just said potato. It was just like, is it like mashed potato? No.
And sure enough, the reason that I changed it from just Boolean was because it wasn't succeeding enough, and I made it into this like kind of completely wrong because it got a bit more reliable. But this example is kind of unfair. It's a good example of how models get things wrong because they get an idea in their head and they carry on like a bit like inexperienced people often do, or people. Anything else I can talk about on evals, or anything else that anyone wants to hear about? I mean, I think we're having a really interesting conversation, but I mean, I know we're not really doing a workshop anymore. We're just having a conversation, but maybe that's good.
If you had 48 hours to learn about a tool related to evals, where would you go? What would your process be to learn about that tool?
My impression is that very few people have done anything genuinely interesting in evals. So I would probably sleep for quite a lot of that time because that's what I need. I think that online, whatever you want to call it, but like evals against real prod data are going to turn out to be the most part of the answer. I think OpenAI buying StatSig was basically a signal that they think evals are going to be about put something live and learn about it. I have a very neat technique doing evals that I identified, and I was speaking to, I won't say the name of the company, but a unicorn legal tech AI startup about this exact problem, and I described the answer, and they all went quiet and took their phone out and noted it down. And so basically what you do is, if you have a chat-based exchange, one of the things you want to know is how good is the model's response. And you almost already have the eval to that, which is in the form of the user's follow-up. So you don't eval the result, you look at the user's response, and you basically categorize that into like, if they say, no, that's shit, try again, you know it wasn't very good. If they say thanks so much and then stop the conversation, or just stop the conversation, you're probably right. And so you can use in that case, use the user's response as your eval. And there are techniques like that which work very well in the chat interface, the chat case. But
I thought about this too, like basically just sentiment of the user response, and then number of turns.
Yeah, you can probably get a pretty good answer of how it's done. And if you're a legal AI startup, you can imagine that that has a chat interface for people that probably works quite well in some cases.
Maybe use another legal.
I work with a lot of lawyers, but
it could be something like, hey, find me best flights to go to the UK.
Yep.
But whether it's optimizing through that, it will return something to you, but whether that's best flight or cheapest or distance-wise, it's difficult thing.
But the reason that where I got to this idea from, and I've seen it work well in a few scenarios, is this is how Google works, right? Like Google's fundamentally ranking of pages is based on they show a page, it never comes back and searches again. It's seen as a very good result. If they're back 30 seconds later or 15 seconds later, you assume it's a bad result, and they then derank the page. And that's why if you go and look up any recipe online, they make you trawl all the way through the page, all through loads of endless description of the ingredients to actually get the recipe, because they want to keep the time on site nice and high to make their site look like it's more useful.
And serve more ads.
And serve more ads. Although interestingly now, they all have a like TLDR section at the top, which has the recipe in it, and that's because AIs want the answer straight away. So I'm told.
But also because then people are more likely to bounce and they can't find the recipe.
Yeah.
So allowing someone to get the
You
recipe.
get just enough of the recipe.
Then they're actually going to spend more time on site.
Yeah.
If it's a recipe technology.
Yeah. But yeah, like using the user's reaction as your eval is probably your best technique. Obviously, that is best done online rather than paying for subject matter experts to go through cases. Although that is also something people want.
So I have another related question. It's more like generic. I'm not sure if you have seen that paper like a year ago that told about how faithful are RAG. So whenever you're providing the context, the model provides a successful result, but is it came from the weights?
Yeah.
Or it's actually you providing context? Any thoughts on this?
I think it's a really hard problem. I the talk by BlackRock, again at one of the AI engineers, about how they have these agents and that all that they're trying to do is to get the model to never use its idea of what Apple's share price is, but only to use like BlackRock's data on what Apple's share price is when it gives an answer. And there is no, I spoke to a startup the other day who have these tiny models that they say are like deterministic in this, and you can literally debug where you're from. You can imagine lots of specific cases like that. Who knows how well they will do, because part of the reason that LLMs work is that like all of their other like random knowledge, that, you know, if it was obvious what you were going to take out from a model to make it just good at certain questions, people would have done that. But the fact is, no one knows what to remove from its training data to make it just good without ever hallucinating. I don't have an answer. Specifically, other than, I mean, running another LLM, guardrail style, does this look right? Probably gets you an awful long way, but doesn't by any means solve the whole problem. Any other questions or anything else that anyone would like me to go through? We are 20 to 4. I think we've done pretty well. Yep.
What are some of the most exciting technologies that are coming out with the AI space that you were interested in learning about, or things that are interesting in
One of the big model companies will release a new model tomorrow. I think it's more or less an open secret at this point that will come out. So it'll be interesting to see. There's lots of the like more breathless and annoying people on Twitter saying that will completely change the game. I suspect that a week later they will all be saying the opposite. So I don't know how true that will really be. It's not.
It will absolutely increase some metric by 20%.
It will absolutely increase some metric by 20%. I will say though, I won't say who the company are or what the model is, but we got EAP access to it for PydanticAI. We got a message in their Slack being like, "You're such a valued partner. You're one of the very few people who have had access to this model." And I forget how they put it. They were like, later on in the message they were like, "So we're really pleased that you Langchain are having access to this model." And they sent us 2 more messages. They obviously had a Slack bot set up that had us confused with Langchain. And then when they gave us access to the model, the project ID they gave us didn't exist in so they presumably gave us Langchain's project ID inside their platform. I don't think it would have done that much use, but like, we obviously weren't entirely the only ones who had access.
But still that is.
So I have the answer to the question. And not what's the most exciting thing, but what's the most boring thing you're excited to see coming out? You're interested in tracing celebrities, so boring is exciting to me. What else is boring out there that you should be aware of?
I think look, MCP was over, as a fan of MCP and definitely like someone who likes David who created it a lot, MCP was overhyped at one point this year. As someone said, basically, MCP came out at the same time that LLMs really got good at tool calling. And so it got an awful lot of the like hype around tool calling works. And then it got a whole bunch of the pushback when people realized that tool calling was not the panacea that someone breathless on Twitter had told them it was. MCP is a like legitimately valuable thing in enterprise. I don't think it's so useful in coding agents, which is the like first place it was used. And so today there's like more people building MCP servers than there are using them. But I do think that long term it probably is a like boring technology that allows enterprise to connect multiple things together. I've seen a few enterprises who are like to use A2A, and I think A2A seems to be, now that there's, SEP 1692, I think it is, came out, which is the task SEP for MCP. If I've got that number right, I'm very pleased with myself because that's why I know it, because someone had used our deep, that was it. Adam from Prefect had used our deep research example to look up SEP 1692, and it had instead come back with some battle that happened in September 1692. It's why I remember the number. They're basically long-running tasks. So basically you can go kick off a job on an MCP server, and then you get back some ID you can go with. I think stuff like that will end up being it won't be the Internet of AI that people sort of thought it might be at one point. I think it will just be another boring enterprise piece of technology that's super valuable in how they use AI.
It's essentially like a machine, agent or a LLM version of an API standard.
Yep. Yeah.
Useful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a useful thing, but it's mostly like APIs, useful in big boring enterprise, not in it's not going to be how all agents serve the internet, I don't think.
If you're in this world of, say, I don't know, thousands of agents, what are the frameworks managing all of this stuff?
So I think that one of the interesting things, Composio are doing a bit of this. I don't think they're doing it quite how I would go about it, but basically you almost want to if you think about the first time you run something as a bit so WebAssembly has 3 different compilers within it. It has first interpreter that it starts running the code with when it first gets the WebAssembly. Then it has the second interpreter that it uses to finish the first compiler that it uses to finish off that first run once it's got it running. And then it has a optimized compiler that gives you fast WebAssembly later, because they care enormously about the first time you run the code being faster than the second time being as fast as possible. And I feel what we want to get to a point where the first time I run a particular flow of call this tool, then this tool, then this tool, the LLM goes and does all of the work of working out what tools to call in what order, but after a bit, automatically gets kind of optimized or compiled into now I have some meta tool that calls these 3 tools in a row, and so that we don't have to go and get the model to figure out every single time how to call each sequence of tools. As in, take an example of I connect to Stripe's MCP server, and I say, I need to export customer details on all of these customers and work out, rank them by how many they are, and then send them all a Christmas card, let's say. And it's going to go and run this particular sequence of 4 different tools over 5,000 customers. The first time it's worth it calling each of those tools in turn. Today it is probably worth just leaving it chonking away for a night, because it's still less work than me actually going and doing the hard work to write the code. At the moment there are basically 2 extremes. There's let the LLM literally figure it out all over, each time, all over, from scratch, or there is write the code or get your coding agent to write the code to do the whole thing. And I think what we will end up with is some middle ground where you have a kind of optimizer in the middle, which goes, actually this workflow becomes completely deterministic by calling these 3 tools. And I have some ideas about how to do that, but I'm not going to talk about them now.
Do you have a working example of what's this thing called, history processor?
Yes. So on Saturday, I was manically trying to build my agent to process this world model that failed, and I had a very basic one. Because one of the problems I kept running into was it kept just blowing the context, and then the whole thing would crash, and I would try it again. And so, so in here, I think I had an example. I actually may have deleted it in a hurry in the last 10 minutes of trying to get to something. Now I'm failing to find the thing I'm looking for. Somewhere I had an example of basically I can't find it right now. Here we are, compact method. This was the like very brutal version of compaction that would allow me to literally, I mean, this was me writing it in an enormous hurry, so she just generated JSON from the entire set of messages, and if they were longer than 200,000 characters, I gave all of that JSON to another model and said, make this smaller. That's a dumb way of compaction, but it didn't work, obviously. I didn't win the hackathon, but like, it kind of started to work. Is that going to work? I wrote, and then I got ChatGPT to write and then didn't use a more complex compaction agent that's here. I haven't tried it, but the idea of here was we put all the messages in as a like big markdown string and then ask it to compact that. But I haven't tried it, so I don't know how well it works. But I mean, that's what, is that what the sort of thing you mean? Like basically?
Yeah, this is exactly what I mean, but I was just wondering if the only way to make it work with tool calling is knowing the nitty-gritty details of each one of the LLM providers to make sure that you're matching the tool and the response, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's problematic.
It's the only way.
Yeah, because basically if you call a tool, if you have a tool call in your history, you need to have a response to that tool call in the history. I think if you do this, which is basically you smash up the whole of your context and you just take everything that's happened in the past and you bang it into one massive, this is what happened in the past message, you get around that problem. I don't know the performance impact of that. But I think that's what like Claude's code compact is fundamentally doing, right? It's just like taking everything and turning it, like getting the model to write a summary of it.
Right. It's just for the type of features that I've been trying to build, like I bump constantly into context limits, which is ridiculous because they're pretty big now.
Yep.
So right now we're kind of like solving it with sub-agents and just a delegation.
Yep. I think sub-agents is a great thing anyway, because like, if you can isolate a task and just give the context needed for that to that agent, it'll do a better job anyway, and you can go and debug it better and work out what it's doing wrong, and you have a isolated thing you can go and eval or reason about. That is like good, makes sense anyway. But if you still need to do some kind of compaction, this might or might not work, or something along these lines. I don't think it is, I suspect it's not much more sophisticated than take all of the messages and combine them into a big object and pass them to a model and say, compact this. You might want to be like, oh, here's an enormous blob of JSON, maybe I don't need all of it. And thereby reduce the amount of stuff that I'm compacting a bit. But maybe the middle of that JSON is what matters, so it's hard. And this is on GitHub if you want it. If you go to, and I would be definitely interested in the idea that we have a, we may add basically some support for some like automatic compaction method to PydanticAI at some point. So my compact method is in this repo. I have literally, I did not look at it because I was too busy. So this is written by Claude Code once, and it's type safe because I make Claude Code write type safe code. But other than that, I'd have no idea what's in it. And there's the brutally aggressive compact version is literally like pass all and see what happens.
Try.
Cool. Anything else I can help with? Otherwise, I think we might draw this to a close. Thank you all for staying with me.